We're going to continue with the book of Hebrews, and this is our final lesson on the book of Hebrews. We're going to Hebrews chapter 13, and yes, we will finish today. Hebrews chapter 13. We have to finish today. We have to. So remember this. The book of Hebrews was written to Hebrews, okay, the Jewish people. And the author, we don't know. Was it Apollos? Was it Silas? Was it Paul? We don't know. And as far as the date, it was before 70 AD. This is because of his emphasis of sacrifices in the present tense, not past tense, as if it were going to happen. If you have no temple, you have no opportunity for sacrifice. Okay? And remember, the argument, the main point of what he's communicating is that Christ is better. Okay, he is better than what is popular back then, what people are tempted to run to, as far as an escape, as far as a foundation of life. For instance, like every generation, there's always something new, right? Your generation, my generation, there's always what's in, what's new. Where do our souls go? What's normal? One generation, this is normal. Another generation, this is normal, right? Our generation, the year 2026. What's something that a human soul would run to as far as a foundation of life? What do you think today?
I don't know. Well,
Say that again.
A family home.
I still think they would go to Jesus as the Son of God.
Yeah, but like there's temptations. So Daniel was saying, what are temptations today that people would run to as an escape, as a foundation for their soul to cling to other than Christ today, Jesus? Okay, me, I would say politics. Okay, I would say maybe a political party, maybe Donald Trump, maybe Kamala Harris. Right? We do that when we see a political right? Right? But false hope, right?
They've pretty much done away with marriage. They don't really believe in that anymore.
Well,
not completely. But
yeah, we're actually going
to. We're partners.
We're actually going to talk about that in this passage. It talks about marriage, but again, these are things that our soul kind of lean on, depending on the timing. Right, so you don't really hear much about, well, we're going to replace Jesus with angels, or Moses, or a sacrifice, right? But for a century, this is what they were tempted to do. They were tempted to put Christ below angels, or they were tempted to put Christ below Moses. Right? Remember, the heart of it is Christ is better than what? Who? Than angels. Because there was a deep reverence from the Hebrew people towards angels because of the law. Well, Christ is better than these angels. Okay, he is God. Christ, they were tempted to put Moses above Jesus, right? But again, Jesus is better than Moses. They were tempted to put the Levitical priest because they wanted the priesthood back, right, in the temple, implying that it was still there. The whole point of Hebrews is, but there's no the Levites they're gone. The Levitical system is gone. But Jesus was part of the Melchizedek priesthood, which transcends. Okay, this third point. And number 4 is that Jesus is also better than your form of a sacrifice, your goat, your sacrifices. Right? That's just an animal. Right? This is a human, but he's God. Right? Which is better. It's eternal. You don't have to keep. You don't even have to keep going back. And that's what he's saying. And then comes along Hebrews chapter 11 and says, well, here's a list, here's a resume of people that have always had faith. They have always had it. It's not, and he starts really from creation, and he goes to Abel's his first person he names, and Abel's as early as it gets, right? And goes down the list of all these people, saying that it was always faith that people believed. Right, it was always faith, and it showed these people endured. Some of the promises that were given back in the Old Testament, they never were actualized, right? But they still had faith. And the same thing with us too, right? In the sense that, say, the return of Christ, the new kingdom, the new Jerusalem, or the new earth. That's the end goal, right? Heaven on earth. But that might not be actualized in our existence. But again, we still believe. We'll probably be dead before that happens. Most people in the last 2,000 years, right? And that's his whole point. Okay? Now, chapter 13 comes along. And chapter 13 is, then how do you live? It's practical. This is this last chapter, if you notice, is always about atonement, Christ. This last chapter is very practical. It's how do you live now in the midst of all this. So the ending is very similar to the book of Romans. As far as the book of Romans, it's all theology until you hit chapter 12. Chapter 12 is when it gets all practical, right? So Romans, we went through the book of Romans. Romans from chapter 1 to 11 is all theological, and then from 12 to the end of it is practical. This is how you live. First, the book of Ephesians, same thing. First 3 chapters, theological. Last 3 chapters, this is how you live. We also went through Ephesians. And then this book, very similar, but it's one chapter as far as practicality. The first 12, this is theologically as far as the superior of Christ. Last chapter, chapter 13, well, this is how you live. Okay? Let's go to Hebrews 13. Can someone read 1 to 3? Hebrews 13. Can someone read 1 to 3?
Let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Remember those who are in prison, as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you also are in the body.
All right. Let brotherly love continue. In the city of Philadelphia, right?
Brotherly love.
All right, brotherly love continue. I lived in Philadelphia before I moved to LA. It's no brotherly love there.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
So I was in Toronto, born and raised. I moved to Philadelphia to go to seminary. And then I was there for a year, and then after a year in Philadelphia, I moved to LA for seminary, transferred. I was all here for school. Went to MacArthur School. So that's why I made it out here. But out of a year, living in Philadelphia, I can conclude, definitely not to say that brotherly love. In theory, right? In theory.
At least you didn't go home.
Right? What's that?
At least you didn't go home.
That's true. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby having entertained angels unaware. Remember those who are in prison, as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you are in the body. So here we have a plea of hospitality, of love, including strangers. Okay, and remember, this is, who's he writing to? Hebrews. Okay, Jewish Christians. And to remember the timing. Okay, the timing was, there was a lot of being marginalized, being neglected, being abandoned, if you were what? A Christ follower. Okay, remember, this was not something popular in the first century, right? So, remember in the book of Revelation, where there's passages of you can't even eat, right? You can't even buy stuff, right? So it made, as far as if you're a Christian, right? That's why some Christians were tempted to say, I'm not a Christian, but in my heart I am, and that was just for the sake of survival, right? Because it was illegal at the time. So as a result, those who were truly faithful, right? It was hard for them to live, right? So when you took upon a person that was a Christian, but you didn't necessarily know them, you were doing the Christian thing, right? So there's an emphasis, obviously, in Christianity to take care of strangers, to take care of the poor, and this concept of family radicalized the first century as far as bringing in strangers. So, for instance, I want to say where it says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers." What? for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. Have you heard of that passage, verse 2?
Yeah.
So in the midst of, say, hospitality is huge in Christianity. Okay, a human need that we all have, two big needs. Every human being needs to have our hearts 24/7, and if is that we need to belong somewhere. You need to belong somewhere. If you're alone, you're living, you're living against your nature. Okay, belonging, and number two is shelter. I think that if you don't have a place to lay your head, a roof over your head, I think there's going to be something inside of us where you feel like you need that. It's just basic survival, right? And us as Christians, this is the essence. You want people to belong. You want to fulfill that need of belonging through Christian community, right? Now, think of it. He says some people in the midst of hospitality, they've entertained what? Angels. So they think they're human, but realistically, they're angels. Can we think of maybe two passages or a passage in the Bible that talks about meaning someone took care of strangers, okay, and the person thought they were human, but in reality, they were actually angels. That's happened before. So this is in reference to Genesis 19 and Genesis 18. Okay, so Genesis 18, you have Abraham. He's fulfilling the call of God, right, to go to the land of Canaan, flowing, right, the promised land, and all of a sudden he's in Huram up north, and what happens is when he's traveling, there's three strangers that appear to him. This is in Genesis chapter 18, right? Three strangers that appear to him, and most likely one of them was God, Christ, right, pre-incarnate flesh, and there were two of them that were angels. So Abraham was visited by God and two angels. There's three men, it says, right? Most likely one of them was God because they called him Lord, right? And so these are angels that Abraham is showing hospitality to. That's a good example. The author is saying, do what Abraham did essentially. But you might think that they're human, but they could be angels, right? It could be a divine appointment. Another instance where there was angels inside a household that there was hospitality was the next chapter, Genesis 19, where Lot. There's two guys that come to Lot's door, and they're angels. And he says, come. And the people outside don't show hospitality. Okay? They show the exact opposite. It's called Sodom. We know. So when I say Sodom and Gomorrah, we don't think a green field, right? Nice breeze, Laguna Beach, right? The ocean. No. We think of immorality. There's a sin based upon sodomy, based upon Sodom and Gomorrah, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Well, these men wanted to sleep with the angels. Okay. Right, so again.
You say at one point that they were neither male nor female.
Yes, yeah.
The angels?
Yeah, this is in Matthew. So, non-binary, essentially. Yeah, but in the form of a human. These cases are obviously different, right? Not every angel. So most. There's a word. It's called theophany. A theophany would be when God appears as a human. He's not a human, but he's appearing as a human. Jesus didn't appear as a man; he was a man. That's why his case is very, very unique, very Jesus. But other cases, like God becoming a burning bush, he didn't remain a burning bush. You said like Joshua 5, the angel of the Lord. He was a soldier. Remember that? The angel of the Lord comes in, and he comes in the appearance of a soldier. And Joshua is looking at this big wall, and he's like, man, it's a big wall. Imagine a Jesus, right, coming. Before he was permanently a man. But he was a man. But again, it was just an appearance of a man. He'd become a man, he wouldn't, right? So, essentially, this is what the author is referring to as far as some people in the midst of hospitality. They've entertained angels. They don't even know that they've entertained angels. Right? Is it a possibility today, do you think, maybe, that you're supposed to take care of a human, but you didn't know that was an angel?
Sure.
Possibly.
Why not?
Possibly, right? As far as, is there a test how you know? I don't know. I have no clue. But the authors writing in the first century, where we went back thousands of years before that, and he's applying it to his contemporary, and they know what he's talking about. This is a Jewish crowd. They know. Okay, but remember, to a Jewish mindset, biological family was everything to a Jew, right? This is why in the Old Testament, this person begot this. There's family lineage, right? That they held on to, they preserved, right? There was a pride about that. But then, all of a sudden, come to the New Testament, and in the New Testament, you have Jesus, who says something like, he completely changed this concept of like family. We still have the concept of family today, as obviously, but the priority of family. Matthew 12, 46 to 50. Who is my mother and who are my brothers? Remember, someone comes, Lord, right? How come your brothers are your mother's over there, right? And then he questions, who is my mother? Who is my brother? He says, whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Changes it. So it's not necessarily those who are biologically related, but those who are internally related to me, and those who share the same Father, right? Luke 8, 19 to 21, my mother, my brothers are those who bear the word of God and do it. Okay? So completely change it. So, as a result, you know what became big first century? This new thing called adoption. You know, Old Testament, you don't really hear much. There's not a lot. Like you have David and Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, his best friend, because remember, they had 3 covenants together. And one of the covenants was whoever dies first, hey, if we have kids, who's going to take care of my kids? Right? And one of them was, for David, obviously Jonathan dies first. He had his son Mephibosheth that David essentially adopts. But what I'm saying is that it's not really that prevalent in the Old Testament. But what became big in the New Testament was this concept of taking care of those who weren't necessarily part of your biological family.
He was crippled, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when the nanny got word that Jonathan died, she immediately ran and she dropped the baby boy, broke his legs, was crippled for the rest of his life. Yeah. So, but this is what completely changed the first century, was this concept of a family. So it became, it was still, people still preserved their line, but it was more, who do we take care of? And it's okay to take care of those who are different, that don't necessarily look like us, that have different last names, and it became those who are part of the faith, right? So, any questions? And you can kind of see in the book of Acts, right? Whenever there was persecution, it was like people ran to homes. They'd run to each other, right? And this is the essence of what the author of Hebrews is saying. So again, there's a sense of radical openness to strangers, to take care of the poor, take care of those who weren't part of your family, right? Because they became each other's family, essentially. Okay? Verse 4. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Okay? So we have marriage and sexual holiness, and this is, again, first century, during the time of the Roman Empire, it was like normal. Okay? As far as adultery, sleeping with a prostitute, this was normalized back then. Okay, now what the Apostle Paul did, what Christianity did, is it brought back sexual ethics into civilization. Okay, it brought back this New Testament teaching, specifically the Apostle Paul, radicalized the West. It radicalized the Western world's mindset of sexual ethics. What was normal back in the day was something called pederasty. I think we talked about it before. Remember Cupid? I told you guys about Cupid, right? Pederasty was the ancient practice, started from the Greeks, not the Romans, but the Romans took upon that upon them of they used to, an older male would disciple a younger boy, And in certain cases, there would be sexual practices. And this was normal between the Greeks. Some of the Romans took upon this. And to us, we have a word for that. It's called pedophilia. Right? Why? It's because we've put order into sexuality, right? God has put a fire inside every human being, right? Preferably for the opposite sex, right? And this is sexuality, and this is for the sake of survival, for the sake of reproduction. But that fire needs to have a restraint, right? And essentially, this is what the author of Hebrews is suggesting as far as how you live your life. Live it within the order of God. Okay, so Bonnie was talking about they're trying to change marriage. Marriage by definition is Christian, or is God. God's first institution to humanity. Genesis 2:24, one flesh union between the male and the female. Genesis 2:24. Well, guess what? That's before the fall. Meaning that this was it was God's plan before the fall for a man and a woman to become together and to reproduce.
Wasn't a vow considered being to God as well as the people that are getting married?
What's that?
The vows that they give to each other?
Yes.
That's also to God as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what marriage is.
Yes.
So think of
they're
that.
trying to take God out of it, or just marriage in general.
Like-
I don't know.
Okay. So secularism, okay? We have all lived in a secular existence, okay? That was historically Christian. Okay, you might argue that America and Europe is Christian. It doesn't look like it. Okay? We were Christian. Europe was Christian. Secularism destroyed it. Okay, when I say secularism, I mean the Bible is not the Word of God. Jesus is not God. God doesn't exist. Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and New Atheism. Question everything. Right? Like that's the essence of secularism. And what if you remove God? It's just a domino effect. Well, then you remove the principles of God. And guess who has to create things? We do. It's called ethical. It's called subjective emotivism, where you have to define everything. Well, guess what? If I define marriage and I say, you know what, the definition of marriage is a man, a woman, a cat, a dog, and a cousin. That's my recipe. And then you say, well, I believe that marriage is between two men, one woman, something. I don't. Well, what if? Guess what? What if my definition of marriage and your definition of marriage clash? Who's the author? Me or you? And that's the issue with secularism. There's
Some
no.
people think you could just stand in front of each other and give each other vows, and that's it.
Yeah. So that's
Who decided
And sign a
that
piece of
a
paper.
judge could marry somebody?
that's the
Justice
issue.
of the peace. Yeah.
That's the issue with Obergefell versus Hodges in America in 2015. This was under Barack Obama. This is why I believe 2015 was that moment that America forever changed for the worse, in my opinion. And remember, Roe v. Wade, Obergefell versus Hodges. This is not an issue of is same-sex marriage. So I'm going off the original topic of is same-sex marriage right or wrong. We're not even saying, or is abortion right or wrong? We're not even discussing the ethics of it. What the issue is that the federal government decided to define what it is. Okay, that's the issue. Democracy is that we, the people, have a say in what something is, right? We have the Democratic Party that has a name after it. But the Democratic Party is the one that decided that the federal government can override all 50 states and say this is what marriage is and you have to apply it. Okay? And that's the issue. So the issue is not is same-sex marriage right or wrong, it's the fact that the federal government that's secular change a religious definition that we have used for thousands of years, all the way back to Genesis chapter 2, whenever that year was. But historically, humans have lived, and by definition, it's religious. Okay, so the Abrahamic faith, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism all go back to Genesis, all adhere to that. Okay, if you don't, what are you? Are you a Buddhist? Are you a Hindu? Or did you make up your own religion? Secularism.
Some people do that.
And that's what happened. Okay, so people want to debate, oh, is it right or wrong? There's not even a discussion if it's right or wrong. It's the fact that why did they impose this on us when what should have happened was that the government, even with Roe v. Wade, was that you allow the states, every state to decide and to vote. Because that's what democracy is about. So if you're in a state and guess what, and they vote, the majority votes same-sex marriage, then that's majority rule. That's true democracy. But when the federal government comes and says this is what it is, and it only leaned one way. Hey, what about the other side? And you're taking a word and you're completely redefining it. So Genesis 2:24, man and a woman. There's only a man. There's only Adam and Eve, right? There's a possibility there's other humans that are far off or whatnot. So we talked about this before, but is this prescriptive? Is it transcend time, culture, people groups? Yeah. Here's why. Because they lived this way for thousands of years, and lo and behold, Jesus comes along in Matthew 19, and guess what he does? He quotes Genesis 2:24, and he applies it to the first century of his time. He says, a man, a woman should be one. So monogamy rules out transgenderism, right? Rules out polygamy, okay? A man and a woman, and guess what? Paul comes along later on in Ephesians chapter 4, and guess what he does? Quotes Genesis 2:24, applies it to his time. See how it transcends, right? And he applies it to his audience, and guess what? The Western world has been living like this for 2,000 years, until the year 2015. Remember, America is the most influential nation in the entire world. Whatever happens here, people follow along. That's just reality. Okay? If there's a trend that happens in America that's evil, guess what's going to happen? People in France, people in Asia, people wherever it is in the world is going to follow along. And that's just what the world's been like since 2020. Okay? So, if America changes, guess what? There's going to be a ripple effect. Okay? That's just reality. That's just what's happened. Okay?
Well, where did the Mormons get that they can have?
Polygamy. Yeah. So that's very similar in the sense that they have redefined the concept of marriage. Okay. So they'll argue for polygamy. So there's the LDS and there's the fundamentalist LDS. The fundamentalist LDS is there's a certain place in Utah that they try to make it legal. Yeah. So I'm gonna close the door.
I got it.
Yeah. Close the door. Yeah. So Michael, you can sit in here too. So essentially, yes. So when you read the Old Testament, it's almost like as if it appears like polygamy is okay. Is that would you like to some people? Yeah. Some people would take the Old Testament. I've had some friends who they believe polygamy is because they find it in the New Testament or the Old Testament.
That's
Right?
why all the kings have
Abraham,
thousands of
David,
wives.
Solomon, right? They had multiple wives. So remember, this goes on, if you're asking why, is it prescriptive or is it descriptive? Is it prescribed? Is polygamy prescribed, right? And a man can have multiple wives? Or is it people just did it? So in the book, in Deuteronomy 17:17 talks about if the nation of Israel were to have a king, and he says he should not have more than one wife, essentially. If someone want to read that, Deuteronomy 17:17. Someone want to read that out loud, okay? So this is before a monarchy, before there was a king, right? The book of Deuteronomy. So this was pre-warned, okay? Just because they did it, it doesn't mean it's permissible. For instance, Samson. It says, and Samson slept with a prostitute. And then the Lord was disappointed. There's none of that. So is that permissible? You see? It's descriptive, meaning it's just describing what he did. Not saying it's good. Right? So us Christians in the 21st century, we have, why did the Bible condemn it? Why did the Bible condemn it? Right? For instance, slavery. Why did Jesus end slavery? Right? Slavery ended by the British Empire. We'll later on, It took that long to end it. Something that has happened for most of since humans have been alive, right? To us in the 21st century, we think African Americans are the only slaves. Where it's like, all you read the book of Exodus, it was already there. How do you think these pyramids were built? And it continued. And at the time, but the thing is this: the reason why something like polygamy or slavery is because, remember, the Bible is not a book that's supposed to end every form of evil. It's about salvation between God and man, and there's principles that the people are supposed to apply to end these things. You see? So the fact that we were hard, or as far as a marriage between a man, that's you're supposed to do that. We ended good. Christians are supposed to do that. We're thankful that some other group didn't do it. Right? We took the principles of Christianity, we applied it, and this is what we got. You see? So when it came to marriage, the same thing goes today. It's just, this is the order that God has given us. This is the very order. Danny?
Did you want somebody to read 17:17?
Yes, Deuteronomy 17:17.
The king must not take many wives for himself, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord, and he must not accumulate large amounts of wealth in silver and gold for himself.
You should read that to Solomon. Right? It literally, that verbatim happened to Solomon. Right? Meaning he had multiple wives. It's what was the practical thing that happened when he had multiple wives? His heart is what drew away from God. That's what he says. And he mentions the wealth too. I didn't know that part. But again, this is before there was even a king in Israel. Remember the first king of Israel in 1 Samuel with Saul. This is Deuteronomy 17:17 with Moses. Right? Again, it's giving you a blueprint as far as this is how we should live. And no different from today. No different from today. This is the only generation, our generation, is where, for the first time in human history, as we know it, that a woman could have multiple men. Before, men, historically, had all multiple women. But today OnlyFans is a generation where a female could have 5 guys, 10 guys, and have that power. Only generation. Like, think of it historically. Like Cleopatra, the last Egyptian pharaoh, was like she had Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, right? But like that's a rare case, right? But what I'm saying is like where it was a norm, where it was a possibility. Like this is the only generation. But again, it's just like it's just as bad as men having multiple partners, right? So, yeah. But
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
The Book of Mormon, that's for the...
Yes.
So that says you can have multiple wives? And that was because whoever in
Joseph
the Mormon
Smith,
church
Brigham
made
Young. Yes, they had multiple partners. But
so they don't, their Bible's kind of like this, but not like this?
No.
I've never seen their Bible, I don't know.
So the Mormons, there's the Book of Mormon. There's the Bible, 66-book Bible. There's the Book of Mormon. There's the Doctrine of Covenants, and there's the Pearl of Great Price. They have those 3 books, so it's this
they have 3 books.
thick, yeah. So it's the Bible plus 3 different books, and one of them is called the Book of Mormon. So there's the Book of Mormon, there's the Doctrine of Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. That's the Mormon Bible. So what the Mormons believe is that, like Islam, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, is that we have our Bible, okay, but along the way, our Bible has been corrupted. So because our Bible has been corrupted, guess what? You know what you need to solve all the issues in the Bible? You need the Book of Mormon. And that solves all your answers, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with a Muslim. A Muslim will say, inshallah, right? The Bible is the Word of God. They believe that. The Old Testament, the New Testament, it even says it in the Quran. But through time, it's been corrupted. And the sad part about all these claims is we have concrete evidence that has not been corrupted. Out of any book in world history. I think I presented this when I talked about Islam a couple of years ago, right? I showed like it's overwhelming. The evidence is overwhelming that this cannot be. It's not corrupted. Yeah. Because if you say the Bible, if you want to apply whatever argument you have and say the Bible has been corrupted, but you have to have you can't just make a claim the Bible has been corrupted. You have to have an argument. What's your resource? What's your sources? Whatever that criteria is, you have to apply to any other historical book. And guess what? Everything falls. That's why. Okay? So, any questions?
Men are in charge too. I mean, you look at the multiple wives. Joseph, Smith or Brigham Young, or a lot of these guys. Hey, they're in charge. Yeah, I want this one. I want that one. I want this one. I want that one. You think that's relevant?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Remember, the Mormon religion. That's just what it is. Okay, they're not Christian. They say they're Christian. Okay, was during the time of the 13 colonies in America. I don't know if you knew that, right? So when you had your 13 colonies, you had New France that started from Toronto or Canada or Quebec all the way down to Louisiana, and then you had California, which was Spain. So, right, this is what America, and then you had the 13 colonies slowly just moving alongside. What happened was that this guy named Joseph Smith believed that God appeared to him, and there was an upstate New York, not too far away from where I'm from, Toronto, like an hour and a half away. But claimed that God appeared to him, Jesus Christ appeared to him, that he was troubled between the Baptist, the Methodist, and the Presbyterian Church. This is in the Doctrine and Covenants, by the way. So of all the 3 books, it's not in the Book of Mormon, it's in the Doctrine and Covenants. He said, "Oh, well, what denomination, Lord?" Because remember, America was Puritan. They wanted to. There's a Catholic Church, and in England that birthed away from the Anglican Church, and then you had the Puritans in the 13 colonies that says, you guys are too Catholic for us. We got to birth. That's what they're called, the Puritans, right? But then you had these denominations like the Baptists, like that, right? That still exist today, obviously. But what happened was that Joseph Smith made it to Missouri, and he thought that this was Eve or Eden. The Garden of Eden, was in Missouri. So they believed that the Garden of Eden is in Missouri. Yeah, and then what happened was that he ended up dying, and then there was Mormon. They call it, we're being persecuted, right? So what they did, 13 colonies, is that they birthed out fast, and they beat the 13. Remember, it's a race. Who can get to the west? And they went ahead as a group, a community, and and guess what? They settled in Utah. And the 13 colonies are still doing this. I forgot who was president at the time, but they're still doing it because they beat him, right? And guess what happened when the Mormon Church, right, when they had to make it to Utah? What was America back in the day? What was America here? They were Indians. They had to clean house. They had to kill a bunch of Indians. And this is true, by the way. I don't mind. This is going to be recorded and put online. I'm fine saying, right? They killed many Indians, and they had to. Right, you know the Mormon culture. They're like, hey, hi, Mr. Nice Guy, all that. No, we know what you did, right? And this was the time of Brigham Young. So Joseph Smith was done, and the next successor was named as Brigham Young. That's why they had Brigham Young University, and he was a pedophile. He had multiple wives. There's a joke, right? When it comes to young girls, bring him young. Bring them young. It's a joke. But it's what they did, and that's how the Mormon Church is in Utah till today. Yeah. And then obviously the 13 colonies made it all the way. There's a war that happened in California. The Mexicans lost, and then America bought them out for $15 million. That's how we have California, right? So no slavery in California, nothing. It was bought for $15 million. And that's how you have America, right? But that's the Mormon history, if you're wondering. Yeah. What else do you guys want to talk about? It's our last time together.
No, I like how you said that
Yeah,
about.
that was informative.
I like how you said that about the wives. Like God is not like saying like He doesn't like a magnifying glass on us saying do this, do that.
Mm-hmm.
He's more like saying like, hey, if you keep doing this,
Yes.
your heart will eventually
Look,
lead you astray pretty much.
the 405, there's lines on it. Okay? When I was in Mexico, it was Yucatan. It was the second safest place in all the Americas. People don't know that. Okay? Top 5, just to give you context, we have this concept of like, Mexico is all bad. No. There's a place, it's called Yucatan. It's right where the Gulf is. The second safest. Like, beautiful place. But there's no lines on the road. So even in the midst of being the safest, what I could see, even though people are moral, they're still, oh Lord, right? When you're driving around, you pay the taxi guy, you're just like, oh, but he's just like, right? Versus here you have lines, and you can kind of see it. When you have lines, things are more orderly. When you have lights, things are more orderly. Guess what? If there's no lines, it gets sloppy. And you ever think? I was like, what if there's a crash, people die, and you need to report it to the police? What do you say? I was here, he was there. There is no, I can't, right? But if you don't, if we don't abide by the rules, people die. You get hurt, right? There's instructions for our safety, right? The ocean, there might be an ocean that has that piece of rope with a float sign that says don't swim past it. Not because we're trying to be harsh and don't do it. You might die. There might be a shark. There might be rock underneath there. We don't know, but it's for your good and safety. That's what marriage is. It's institutional, right? Remember, we all have a fire in us. It's called sexuality, right? And God is saying, okay, He put that fire in you, right? That's why we're alive. We're all alive. You know why? It's because our parents had fire, right? And on and on and on and on and on. But it's just there needs to be order with that. And if there isn't, you look like Sodom and Gomorrah. You want to sleep with angels that are men. Right? You look at our... we talk about societal collapse. It's these lines, the lines on the road, are slowly being erased away. And people are saying, no this, no this, no this, no this. Right? And then they have their own interpretations. Kevin, we're talking about Hebrews 13, and then we were just going from verse 1 to 4, and this is very practical, this chapter, so it's more we're just having discussions on like what's going on, and so we're in verse 4 right now, and we just went on a tangent about marriage, about polygamy, now we're talking about Western collapse, right? And we talked about Birkevel versus Hodges, if you're wondering. Was in 2015 where Barack Obama, that's where the whole Supreme Court, so essentially it's a Supreme Court case. A couple in Ohio wanted to get married, but it was illegal at the time, so they went to Missouri, heaven, or according to the Mormons, and then they got it legalized there, went back to Ohio, and then when they were in Ohio, one of the partners died, essentially, and then Ohio did not acknowledge this, the marriage that happened in Missouri. So they brought that case to the Supreme Court. It got trickled down, and essentially the Supreme Court favored Obergefell, which is the husband, or the only husband at the time, the living one. And that one case made same-sex marriage legal across all 50 states. And that's what changed it. And shortly after that, you have hookup culture, you have transgender. It opened the door to sexual ethics. That's what I'm saying. Once you remove the line, now you create your own lines. And guess what happens in society? Chaotic.
That doesn't make sense. Just because the woman died and the man...
No, they were both men. 2 men.
Oh, they're 2 men.
Yeah.
I misunderstood that.
Yeah. So, because it was illegal at the time in Ohio. And then it was a fight between the federal government and some of the conservative states. And the last state standing was Indiana. And Indiana had a governor by the name of Mike Pence. And he fought. He was the one. That's good. No, I'm glad he fought. And he tried to use RFRA, which is the Religious Restoration Act. So I wrote about this, which is the Religious Restoration Act, which is essentially you're using religion as your justification. And historically, America was always about RFRA, right? So there was a case in Oregon. This is how RFRA started. In Oregon, where this Indian wanted to use peyote in a spiritual practice, and the state said no, and he appealed to his religion and says, "Hey, you're violating my religious duty." And then that's where, and this was like, I think Bill Clinton was president, and all of America sided with this, right? This is like in the 90s. Fast forward to 2015, no one's supporting Mike Pence. He's crazy. He's all by himself. So even in the 90s, all America supporting this RFRA. Next thing you know, it doesn't even apply to America. And it just showed you secularism has infested America. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? No? All right, let's continue. Verse 5. 5 and 6. Verse 5. Yeah, Danny?
Yeah, briefly, you talk about the peyote being real. Now they're bringing it back, and they're trying to legalize hallucinogenics for post-traumatic stress and a bunch of things because it's worked. And these guys, they had to go all the way down to Mexico to do it, but they're using hallucinogenics to for post-traumatic stress and all kinds of stuff. It's a recent thing.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't.
Yeah, that it's a little different. Like just the concept of peyote coming in, using it. It's not that. It's the grounds of your religious conviction.
Sure.
You see, that's the essence of it. So the reason why this guy in Oregon, this is in the 90s, needed peyote because it was an Indian practice, a native Indian practice that they had, and they used it, and that was his justification. Mike Pence, the exact same thing. Same-sex marriages against Christian. I'm a Christian. I'm a governor, right? So, again, they applied it in the 90s. They didn't apply it in 2015, which just showed the religious essence of America was slowly dwindling.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I'm going to say it's just they're changing religion. That's all they're doing, from Christian to non-Christian, and the non-Christian you have to define what that is, right? So,
But
yeah, Kevin.
I was just gonna say, the culture worldwide for the unlearned is labels and kind of like just kind of like ignorant understandings of belief patterns and systems and different things. So it's like people don't necessarily read the fine print, which is like, it's in the word. Like everything that God says is in his word that is his. And so it's like people a lot of times they don't really get into they don't really go deep and see like what he's saying, like like we're doing with like the Bible study and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's just you see a lot of people just going back and forth with all these different misunderstandings.
Yeah.
But it's like when you read the fine print, it's like it's all there and it's like complete. So I just think it's so important to. That's what they always say. Like read the fine print. Well, it's really important for your faith.
Yeah.
Ruben, is Hebrews what?
Hebrews 13. So we've been on Hebrews, and this is our final chapter.
So it's on authority.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're on chapter 13, and let me read Hebrews 13. Let me read 5. Someone want to read 5 and 6? Verse 5 and 6, Hebrews 13.
Life free from love of money, and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will not leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?
Okay, this is applicable today. The reason why it's applicable today is because, remember the context here is the Hebrew Christians, they lived under pressure because they didn't have full access to work. They just didn't have, because of their faith. So when you don't have full access to work, what happens inside of you? What happens? You just don't have a lot of money. And if you don't have a lot of money, what happens? You get anxious. You get fearful. When's the next time am I going to eat? When's my family going to eat? Where am I lay my head tonight? Right? These are the basic things, and this is what was going on. Very similar to the book of Revelation. Very similar to the book of Revelation. Revelation 2, 9 and 10 says, I know your afflictions of your poverty, yet you are rich. The reason why Christ had to say that is because, again, there was an insecurity. There was how am I going to do this? How am I going to live in the midst of being a Christian during the time of the Roman Empire where it's illegal? Right? I think a lot, even practically, Christian, secular, I think all of us can, meaning, I think there's a lot of people under pressure financially.
All right now.
Yeah.
Right now, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So I'm talking about the emotional effects of what people are experiencing is, I don't think as bad as the first century Christians, but we can relate to this. We can relate to this, the stress, the lack of contentment, right? The lack of contentment that we can experience because we're practical people. You got to eat. If you're dehydrated, what do? You got to drink water. You can't read about water. You got to drink it,
Yeah.
right? And very similar today is that there's a temptation. So What he does here is, notice how he says, keep your life free from the love of money, right? When you're in when you're in the position of, where am I, there might be something inside of you that it's a seed of like, all I think about is money now, right? That evolves into remember, there's nothing wrong with money. It's that heart. It's that, very similar to the marriage thing, right? Where your heart all of a sudden is altered. Same thing with money, right? And be content with what you have, for he has said. And here, what he does is he quotes Deuteronomy 31, verse 6, I will never leave you nor forsake you. The essence of it is your heart. That's the essence. What is it? This is why it's applicable today, is because I think if anyone that's in a financially binding situation, your heart might be affected by it, and there might be a sense of compromise, a sense of, I'm going to do it on my own, forget God, right? Mindset that you might have. And then he quotes Psalm 118, verse 6 to 7, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear, what can man do to me? And the essence of this is contentment. Okay, it's not a personality, right? Oh, this person's content. They're just like that. No, they're human just like any of us, right? It's a decision that you make, and the essence of contentment is God truly enough for you, right? Psalm 23, verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, what? I shall not want. Okay, so it's not money, it's your heart of contentment in the midst of your situation. Okay, someone want to read 1 Timothy 6 to 10 out loud? 1 Timothy 6 to 10.
I'll read it.
Okay.
So easy with the app. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Isn't that what Paul said in one of the epistles about
Philippians 4.
being content?
Mm-hmm.
Where was that again? I forgot.
Philippians 4.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, no, 6 to 10, Kevin. 1 Timothy.
Oh, 6 to 10. Sorry.
I was waiting.
I was like, I'm done. That was like the shortest verse.
But
godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can not take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kind of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs.
okay. So again, this in reference to money in the sense of contentment, right? When people lose that contentment and grow greedy, nasty things happen, right? People get cheated, people get robbed, people get murdered, all for the sake of what? Wealth, opportunity, right? So again, the heart of what he's trying to combat here is be okay with God alone. And I think that's a good application for all of us. Like, there's things that we have outside of us that we want, but let's say you don't have it. What's your heart? Are you miserable for the rest of your life? Are you discontent? And the heart of what he's saying is, can you say Psalm 23:1? I shall not want. Right? Verse 7 and 9. Can someone read that? Hebrews 13. Let's continue.
Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you, the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be led away by diverse and strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by foods, which have not benefited those devoted to them. We have an altar from which those who serve the tent have no right to eat. For the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy places by the high priest as a sacrifice for sin are burned outside the camp. So Jesus also suffered outside the gate in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. Therefore, let us go to him outside the camp and bear the reproach he endured. For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. Through him, then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruit of the lips, they acknowledge his name. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God.
Okay, well, you went up to 16 there. Let's just summarize here. He starts off with leaders, submitting to your leaders. Remember, there was no Bible at the time. A lot of times we have this concept that, like, God only speaks to you through the Bible. Okay, remember, how did Enoch grow in his faith? And there was no Bible. There was no Jews. There was no, right? How did Abraham? How did Job, that God said is the most he's a God-fearing man of all the world. There's no Bible at the time. But there's the heart and there's God. There's the heart and there's God. But at this time here, there were they didn't have the Bible. They had church. They had the church. They had church leadership that they were relying upon, right? And then, so essentially, this is about order here, very similar to sexual ethics, about money, is that follow the church leadership for structure, right? And then he goes on in verse 10. I think that Danny read that too. Notice this though. He talks about a camp, being outside the camp. We have an altar for which, verse 10, those who serve the tent have no right to eat. And he says, for the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy place by the high priest as a sacrifice for sins are burning outside the camp. You see that? So holy priest would be outside. Verse 12, for Christ also suffered outside the gate in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. Therefore, let us go on outside the camp and bear the reproach he endured. So, essentially, this is referring to some of the sacrifices that they made, like the sin offering, which essentially the Jews, or they would sacrifice animals outside the camp because they were unclean. Okay? Remember, when Jesus was crucified, it was outside the gates of Jerusalem. Okay? So, very similar. This is all in Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement. Okay? Verse 13, though, his application, therefore, let us go outside the camp and bear the reproach he endured. So, essentially, he's applying that to us, or his audience, meaning Christ was outside the camp. What does that mean? If an animal was outside the camp, it meant that they were defiled, right? Jesus was crucified with sacrifice outside the camp, which what does that mean? He was defiled. He was an outsider. He was nothing. What he's saying is if you are treated the same way, endure it just like Christ. So the Christians at the time, they were outsiders. They couldn't work. They were rejected. Right? When you see people being persecuted in Nigeria, around the world, this is what he's applying it to. This is what Christ went through. Right? And his application is to endure. Okay? So remember, they would be sacrificed outside the camp. Jesus was sacrificed outside the gates too. It was humiliating. And if you experience humiliation, endure it just like Christ did, is what he's trying to say. Okay? Can someone read, because we only have a minute here, 17 all the way to the end, 17 to 25. Can someone read?
Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be no advantage to you. Pray for us, for we are sure that we have a clear conscience, desire to act honorably in all things. I urge you the more earnestly to do this in order that I may be restored to you the sooner.
Okay. So this is a benediction here of verse 20. Now may the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord, the great shepherd of the sheep, by the blood of the eternal covenant, equip you with every good that may do his will, working in us the which is pleasing in the sight, through Jesus Christ, to whom be forever and ever. Amen. Notice how he says, working in us. Remember the old covenant was just do. Just do. That's the Jewish mindset. Just do. Right? You feel like killing that guy? Don't kill him. That anger still persists? Just don't physically kill him. Right? You feel like sleeping with this person? Well, just don't do it. That fire might be burning, but just don't do it. Right? That's as long as you didn't your feet. Jesus comes along and says, no. Where's your heart at? Because if you think of it, you've done it. Right? And this is the internal essence of Christianity, is that God motivates you. That's Jeremiah 31. That's the new covenant, is that he's going to put a desire, a fire in you to do that which is good. Right? So when it comes to obedience, it's not just doing. It's that God gives you a desire. The light bulb goes on top of your head and says, I get it. I'm going to do it. Right? Clean your room. Oh, man. You know what? You don't need to tell me to clean my room. I'm going to do it because I like cleanliness. Big difference. See that? One is begrudging. Push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. When you're... are you the one pushing? If you're the one pushing, it's internal. Or am I being pulled? If I'm being pulled, it's external. I don't want to do it. I'm being pulled. Grabbing the son by the ear, right? By the shirt. You're being pulled. Versus pushing, you're the one doing it. It's inside. It's inside you. But what the New Testament, what the Holy Spirit does, is he puts a pushing spirit inside of all of us where we want to. You don't need to tell me to clean my room. I want it to be clean. I don't like dirty. I like following the lines on the side. I see why. Light bulb. Right? Let me close here. Okay. So this is the book of Hebrews. So remember this. Chapter 1 to 10. The superior of Christ. 4 arguments or 4 reasons why he's superior over the angels, over Moses, Levitical priesthood, sacrifice. Okay? Have faith in Christ. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you there's examples of that. And people always had faith in chapter 11. It gives that list. Chapter 12, continue to endure. Just like the people of old, I want you today to endure. You might get disciplined by God. You might go through hardship, but continue to endure. And then chapter 13 comes along and says, this is how you live it. This is how you endure. He gives us these principles here.